People of the 80s is the name of an exhibition held at CIN CIN restaurant on the West Coast by photographer Bob Kiss. And they really are some of the most beautiful people of the late 70s and the 80s. With me is Bob. Hi, Bob. A pleasure as always.
Good morning, Jewel. Good to see you.
And we're going to get to do one of my favorite things that I like to do with Bob Kiss, which is a walkthrough of the exhibition. So we start with famous Russian dancer Rudolf Nureyev. Let's talk a little bit about this.
This is actually one of the most editorial feeling shots I've got in the exhibit. It was shot handheld 35mm with an old Leica M3. And he was about to go on his Japanese tour. He was about to go all over Japan to the major cities dancing. And the company that was publicizing the tour hired me to do some very editorial, very lifestyle shots where you just catch him working out, warming up and stuff. I have a whole bunch of them, but I like this because looking right at you, and you capture the sort of wry humor that he had. He was quite a naughty boy. And this sort of gives you, he's sort of looking at you with that little smile and also like, what do you want? But I also like the fluidity of his movement. Even though his muscles everywhere, he's very much like the orchid. It just seems to flow through the picture.
Well, as we walk to the next photograph, tell me a little bit about how you got into this kind of high-end photography.
Well, that's curious. I actually started photography like most people did as a kid, and I went into research. I was training at RIT to use photography as a research medium. And then one winter, my girlfriend at the time, Sunny Redmond, was a model, and she was going to St. Croix, and she said, "Bob, come with me." I thought, why not? So the client was kind enough. They said, we'll cover his airfare. He seems like a nice boy. So they took me down, and there I saw George Barkington in a bathing suit and a terry cloth top photographing scantily clad women on the beach in St. Croix. And I said,
that's the job for me.
Okay, my life in a laboratory or my life on the beach photographing pretty girls. Gee, now that was a real tough decision.
Yeah,
and that brought us to the present.
Now this is a very young Jodie Foster with a very Veronica Lake kind of look. Tell us about this.
Yeah, this was for Interview magazine, and it was indeed in, let me just double check, senior moment, 1980, that's correct. She had just finished, I believe it was Taxi Driver, and they wanted to photograph her showing both a sophisticated side and a more playful young side, and we'll get to that other picture in a few seconds. So indeed, the stylist and makeup person did her with a very strong, if you look closely, very strong line above the eye, deep red lips, double-breasted jacket, hair hanging over one eye, very Veronica Lake. Someone else said it could be Lauren Bacall. Sure, either one, but their intention was Veronica Lake. Open collared shirt, the whole 9 yards.
The thing I love about it is how you managed to get the shadow in the exact same spot and how striking the shadow is. The shadow, you know, sometimes you do photographs and the shadow can be shadowy, but this is very, very striking. Tell me how you set it up.
Well, this was a style that I was using. It was quite a popular style to use the shadow as a design element at that time. I wasn't the only photographer doing it, but I also used a spotlight so that you had a darkening here and a darkening here, sort of framing your subject, and then her and her shadow balancing each other in an asymmetrical composition. So it became part of the design of the picture, not just a close-up of her. So I just enjoyed that. That was shot in the old days. That one was 35mm that came up this big. This was shot with my Hasselblad. The negative was that big, 2 1/4 inches. And you can see it comes up so beautifully. That big, 2 1/4 inches square. Comes up really beautifully. Scanned, Rico and Randy Brooks let me borrow their special film scanner to use for this purpose. And they were very kind. And it's amazing how well they come up. I don't take credit for that. That's a combination of Kodak and the scanner, not me.
Now here's a guy we all know very well, a very young The Donald.
Right. This was for the New York issue of Paris Vogue. I was hired from Paris because I had been over there shooting for them, and they said, "Bob, we're going to give you a job to shoot in your hometown." So this, again, is the New York issue, and one of the main things featured in the New York issue was an entire 10-page spread on Trump Towers. I photographed something from every one of the boutiques in Trump Towers, everything from food to garments to jewelry to everything. And this was in his office. It's a heck of a nice location. It's in the penthouse of Trump Towers.
Nice.
You can see that's the Plaza Hotel
in the background
behind him. Yep, and that Central Park going off into the distance. There's a little story here. Would you like to hear?
I'd love to hear it.
Well, we arranged with Ivana, who was his wife at the time, to get in there at about 7:30. So we came in and set up. Everything was ready, and I pulled my usual trick. I took a Polaroid of one of my assistants standing where he was going to stand. When he came in, I said, "Good morning, Mr. Trump. We're going to make you look just like this." He said, "Oh God, I hope not." You know. Anyhow, so what happened is he looked around and he saw all the equipment and he saw everything ready to go, and he said, this is very professional, as we shook hands. And I looked around and I said, you look very successful. And he broke up laughing. He said, okay, one wise guy knows another. So we had a good time. Anyhow, he was a bit shy for the camera, but I finally got him to give us that wry kind of look. He was known for being a bit of a ladies' man at the time, so hence the King of Hearts.
Nice, very, very nice.
Thank you.
Now, Patti LuPone.
Right. I first photographed Patti for Interview magazine. I shot a cover of her and a number of pages inside when she was in Evita. And this one was actually to publicize a solo Broadway show she was doing, a one-person Broadway show. And we did many different looks and feelings. I just love this one because of the shape of the hat.
Yeah, and how it sweeps. And it has
her.
that very Audrey Hepburn kind of feel
exactly.
to it. Yeah.
And she also has a certain sharpness of look that I love. So this is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
I've forgotten how tall he was.
7'6".
Yeah.
When he comes, like this doorway here, he would have to duck under doorways. He came into my studio, had to duck through the doorways and stuff. My assistant, that's my assistant, he's 5'8". Now that lets you know, I mean 5'8" is not enormously tall for a man, but you can see this guy is almost 2 feet taller. This was also for Interview magazine. He was, in those days, still playing for the Lakers. He would retire not too long after this. And many people may not know that he has been inducted just in late 2012 into the Sports Hall of Fame. So he's a Hall of Famer. And, by the way, just jumping back to Jodie for a second, we can mention it again when we look at that print, that she just received the Golden Globes Lifetime Achievement Cecil B. DeMille Award. So that's a heck of a thing as actress and director. So some people said, well, is Jodie that hot? I thought, yeah.
Yes, she is. And she's
Lifetime
done an
Achievement.
amazing body of work. Yes, she is.
Incredible stuff.
In those days, was Bob Kiss a big name the way Annie Leibovitz is a big name now? If you're anybody of note, Annie Leibovitz has taken your picture. Was Bob Kiss that kind of big name?
I wasn't quite as big as Annie Leibovitz has become because she got in with Condé Nast and has been shooting for Vanity Fair for 2 decades. But I was in the top 10%, sure. People all over the world knew me. I would make the mistake of walking into a restaurant in Paris or something, or you know, saying the reservation for Bob Kiss, and somebody, oh, you're the photographer. I was like, just trying to have dinner. And sadly enough, some people still remember that name from the Jurassic era. But yeah, I was in the top 5 or 10% of celebrity and fashion photographers. Like I said, Annie stayed and I quit. After the injury of my right arm in Brazil in '89, and a few more years, I just said, nope, I've had enough. I've given enough of my life. 20 years.
I'm going to Barbados.
You bet. Hey, when the tough gets going, the tough go to Barbados.
Was it easy, or how difficult was it to be able to shoot some of these icons and get them to be comfortable with the camera, and for you to get these beautiful shots?
Actually, that's a very good question. I guess the way to explain it is it's called gestalt. The whole part of the process matters. Let's take, for example, if this gentleman were shooting film and it were a woman instead of a man, older instead of younger, et cetera, that would affect us and how we are in front of the camera.
Okay.
Every element of the process affects the process. The place you are, the temperature, the kind of camera, the kind of person, male or female, you know, all these things, everything, the kind of lighting, whether it's strobe or tungsten or available, all that affects how a person responds to a portrait. And so I believe it was Oscar Wilde who said in Picture of Dorian Gray, the count in there says, a portrait made with feeling is as much a portrait of the photographer as it is the subject. And he was getting at the idea that all of it is involved. If you're the photographer, your emotional state and how you deal with the subject. If I'm the subject, where I came from, what happened just before I walked in the studio. That's why I always took some time and gave the subject, even before they went to the dressing room, gave them a moment to sit down, have a cup of tea, a glass of wine, sparkling water, chill, leave the street behind. Then we went into the dressing room, which was kept cool, air conditioned, not too bright, just bright enough for the makeup artist to work. And I would sit and ask them a few questions. I would do whatever homework you could. Remember, this was the 80s. We couldn't Google them. We had to call their PR agent to have a press kit sent, and I'd leaf through it. And I'd ask them some questions. And then what I would do is when they were on the set, I would then bring up the topics that I saw made them glow. Whatever made them happy, whatever turned them on. And believe me, they did 90% of the job. That's a secret. They did 90% of the job because they lit themselves up. My job was to help them feel comfortable and safe so they could open up and come out of their shell. That's what portraiture is really about. If you haven't got that, you're just going to get that sort of stiff thing.
We're back. Beautiful People of the 80s by Bob Kiss, an exhibition of celebrity photographs. It's right here at CIN CIN restaurant. And Bob, let's start by talking a little bit about why you decided to put together this exhibition. And that's before we get to the slim, sexy, long, flowing hair, you behind the camera.
You mean her long hair, my short hair. Why did I go into fashion?
Well, why'd you put together this exhibition?
Oh, why did I put that? You know, it's a good question. The 80s seem to be very popular. People are constantly doing movies about it. Studio 54. Now all the people who were young and then are now venerable and
revered,
sought after, and everyone goes, "Oh my goodness, look at that!" There's so many films that idolize and portray that era. I just figured I had all these photographs that I had made for Interview, Paris, German and British Vogue, Town and Country, all these magazines, and I said, well, let's bring them out. Many of the people, as we mentioned earlier, are now major stars. Jodie Foster, you know, in her award, Abdul-Jabbar in the Hall of Fame. I mean, and of course the three designers, which we'll see in a little while, are household names. They're icons.
Yeah.
This is Patti LuPone again, and I was working on a series called Resident Aliens, and I was photographing with the Lunar Hasselblad, which put these little crosses in. And those are called photogrammetric marks, because when you would take a picture on the moon, you could actually make a map from the photograph. Some of the people there were Isaac Asimov, Henry Geldzahler, Andy Warhol. There's a portrait of him that I did using that camera. I was going to make a series. And so I talked Patti LuPone into letting me come into her dressing room and photograph her. If you look closely, now remember this is done in a mirror.
Yeah.
You'll see that it is 10 minutes before 8. Needless to say, as soon as I finished this shot, she tossed us out because she was about to go on stage.
Exactly,
in Evita.
at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, she's in Evita. Well, thank God she actually didn't have to show up until 8:15 because firstly, the curtain is 8:15, and secondly, I think she was 15 minutes after the intro music. But still, she had to finish getting dressed, and she didn't want us hanging around. So this was great fun.
Dominique Sanda is another one of the people captured in this exhibition, Beautiful People of the 80s. And she was a famous actress, wasn't she?
Absolutely. More famous in Europe than in the United States, but absolutely beautiful with those intense eyes and that beautifully shaped face. She was in, the earliest film I know her in is The Garden of the Finzi Contini. She couldn't have been more than 18 or 19. She's gorgeous. And then she was in films like 1900 by Bertolucci, The Conformist, also by Bertolucci. And this was for Interview magazine in 1981. She had just starred in a European film called Voyage en douce. And it was, we did a whole series of photographs, including a cover and a bunch of fashion shots and stuff of her. But I love this one because, number one, it sort of has a feeling almost of a fencing mask and is surrounded by these silk flowers, but also just the intensity of her look. I mean, those eyes just rivet you.
Yeah, they really do grab your attention.
Yeah, and it's I find her to be an amazingly beautiful person physically. She's just, I mean, powerful as a character as well. There's one of the pictures is a little story, which she just came out of the dressing room, and all the guys in there, the makeup artist and the stylist and the hairdresser, going, "Oh, it's fabulous, fabulous, fabulous," and they dressed her up a little bit strangely. And she came on the set, and she leans forward to me, and she says, "Bobby, tell me the truth. This is not fabulous." So I said, well, I won't say that out loud, but I agree. I said, why don't we call the editor back out and talk a little more? So we changed the look, and we got some great shots. She relaxed and got into it. But it was so that deep voice. I think Sanda, was she Austrian? I'm not sure. Bobby, this is not fabulous. So there were those sensitive moments when I was on a tightrope, and I couldn't contradict my editor and the staff. At the same time, I couldn't contradict her because she was right. And I had to pull both sides together. We got some great shots, so I feel good about that. There are many galleries here in Barbados, but I did a bit of research. Galleries will get anywhere between 15, 25, even 30, 40 people a day, maybe at the top. This restaurant has 150 a night.
Wow.
And that's just the dinner. There's also a lunch crowd, which can be anywhere as few as 20 or so and up to 50 or more. So it's easy to see that nearly 200 people a day see my work. And the other thing is a restaurant like this, which is an excellent restaurant, but also is in the, the 4 and 5 star level, the people who come in would have the expendable cash to purchase these prints. So it seemed to me that it was a focused market. Last but not least, they would be people who would also know the names Givenchy, Valentino, Oscar de la Renta, etc. So I was hoping that this was the place where the market has dinner and lunch. Lovely.
You raised some interesting perspectives there. Should more of our artists be looking at the kind of elements that you look at when you determined where you wanted to hold your exhibition?
I think this is part of it. I, of course, prefer when restaurants buy my prints. But when it comes to showing a large show, this is one of the considerations. If I were to have a perfect world, I would take the money from one of the print sales and ask Larry and Michelle if I could install track lights where each of the prints are, and have track lighting. See, that's one thing that galleries usually have, is they have excellent lighting. But again, they simply don't get the traffic that I know of. I would be very surprised if any gallery on this island had 200 people a day.
I distinctly remember having a bottle of this as a birthday gift one year.
That's right. That's right. He was introducing it. This was 1984. That was the year it was introduced, and I photographed Hubert de Givenchy for Town and Country. He is 6'6". He came into my studio, and I said to him, "A man I can look up to." And the thing that I found wonderful about these people is they are the tops. This is the triumvirate, the fashion triumvirate. Okay, if I had had Giorgio Armani over here, I would have had them all. You
would have had them
but
all.
I didn't get to photograph Giorgio. I'm sorry. I would have loved to, but I did okay. But the
now
thing
here we've got Valentino.
No, I just wanted to mention how gracious they were. Super successful, top of the world. And yet they were kind and gracious to someone like me. Okay, I was a known photographer, but they didn't need to be. They were very nice. I mean, if they were working with Avedon or Scavullo, perhaps they would have needed to be gracious, but they were gracious to me, a younger person on his way up, which I found very nice. I think what they understood was that they stand on the top of a pyramid, and that pyramid is made of other people who respect them and believe in them and work hard for them. And when someone remembers that, they treat their employees better.
Differently. That's
Yeah,
very
or people who they're working with. This is Valentino and Giorgina Brandolini. She's Italian nobility. She was managing his boutique on Avenue Montaigne in Paris at the time. This is styled this way because this issue of Interview magazine was dedicated to the famous Hollywood photographer Hurrell. And all of the pictures in it, the majority of the pictures were either Hurrell's pictures or were done in a Hollywood style. So once again, I used the spotlight, set up my big 8x10 camera, the same camera I shot my chattel houses with, the ladder. You know, this was sort of the stuff you always saw in a Hollywood studio, you know. So I set it up to feel that way. They brought in this lovely, lovely chair.
Beautiful chair.
One of the things that was interesting is Georgina didn't know me, and I had a whole series of my photographs on the wall, and they didn't know that I knew Italian. And so Georgina's saying, "Well, who is this guy? Can we count on him?" And Valentino said to her, quietly, but I could hear him. He didn't know I knew Italian. He said, "I've seen his work. It's absolutely beautiful. We can trust him." There's that graciousness again. He understood that I didn't need to be as big a name as Scavullo at the time to do a beautiful shot. He loved this picture. They bought one. So.
Okay.
And then we come to the famous Oscar de la Renta. I didn't get to do a lot of creative here because he insisted on being photographed exactly the same way by everyone. He always sat. He would not let you use a hair light because he did not have a lot of hair. And yet I like his wry smile. I caught he was looking at I think he was looking at the makeup artist, who was this very beautiful young woman. And I caught that sort of
almost predatory looking in.
Well, perhaps predatory or perhaps just charmed. Either way.
Well, that too.
Either way. Of course, wearing one of his suits, I have to confess that to this day I would give anything to have either a De La Renta, a Valentino, or a Givenchy suit. Not that one has much opportunity to wear a beautiful wool suit in Barbados, but look at the way they fit those guys.
Yes.
I mean, is that amazing?
Really tailored.
Yeah, man. Those guys knew how to do their clothing. They really did. This was actually for an eyeglass ad. He was doing an eyeglass license, and they had me photograph him to promote this whole new line of beautiful eyeglasses and sunglasses. So it was good fun.
We'll take a quick break, but when we come back, Bob had so much work, he needed also to do a book. Stay with us. We're back. The walls of CIN CIN restaurant could not possibly hold all of Bob Kiss's prints, so he put some of them in a book form.
That's correct. We had about 11 spaces, so I decided to show a few extras right here. This is Joan Jett. I photographed her for her Bad Reputation tour.
The original bad girl.
Yes, indeed, the first major rock and roll woman. That's
girl.
right.
That's right. This is before Madonna.
Yeah, absolutely. She broke the ice. She
did.
laid the groundwork. This is Volker Schlendorf for German Vogue. He's a famous director of films, both in Europe and the United States. He directed Dustin Hoffman in Death of a Salesman. Won an Oscar for that. This is my first shoot for Interview Magazine. This is Angela Molina and Carol Bouquet. They were in Buñuel, the surrealist filmmaker and artist, in his film The Obscure Object of Desire. And she became the Chanel girl for like a decade. Peter Beard, the first man to do a book on preserving the wildlife in Africa to stop the poaching. I think I mentioned to you, he has the dubious honor of having been flogged in public for shooting a poacher. And nowadays you get paid to shoot poachers, so he was there a little too early, you know. Was that premature morality? This is Margaret Trudeau, also for Interview Magazine, 1978. Boy, that was a few years ago, huh?
Yeah, because by then her husband, Pierre Trudeau, he was no longer Prime Minister
That's
of Canada.
right. He had just lost the election to someone just a year or two earlier. Isaac Asimov, famous author of more than 450 books. Many people don't realize more than half of which were nonfiction. He did textbooks, books on religion, and of course he wrote the Foundation trilogy and all those science fiction books. This is Catherine Oxenberg, Yugoslavian princess, but also she was in, I think it's something Landing. She was in that TV show.
Knots Landing.
Knots Landing. That's right.
Landing.
She was in Knots Landing. Yeah, she was the beauty in Knots Landing. Gorgeous young woman. This is a Robert Lee Morris earring, 3 ounces of gold.
Wow.
Now, when we did it, we thought it was a lot of money because that was about $900. Now, 3 ounces of gold is about 6,000, 7,000 US, almost 9,000 US. I think it's 2,700 to 2,800 now. So it's nearly 9,000 US for that gold, just for the gold, not the earring. This is another photo of Donald Trump. This is him being a little more sort of reserved rather than the King of Hearts. This is Erte, the famous illustrator and artist.
I remember, yeah.
This was at the Asterix house, Nelson Gay. It's now owned by another family. Many people don't know that he was the first person to do the alphabet out of naked bodies.
Wow.
It's been done many times photographically, but he was the first to do it. And he used to do covers for Vogue magazine when it was illustration before it was photography. He was around for a long time. And of course, Sir Cliff Richard, this is from his calendar shoot. I think it was on, I never can remember, it's page 3 or page 6 of one of those British newspapers. It's supposed to show pretty girls, but they decided he was...
The Sun, page 3.
Page 3. They decided he was so good looking, they ran this picture. They figured, well, if we're going to show cheesecake, we can show this guy, and he's in great shape. I should look so good, you know what I mean? Anyhow, and that's pretty much the show.